And then I have a separate, um, just let me do a quick check. I also use a separate podcasting platform for audio only. So I'm ready to go in 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen. Today with me, I have a special guest and a great topic, you guys. My special guest is Baran Dilaver, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Wonderfeel Biosciences. Throughout his career, Baran founded and successfully led numerous startups, developed award-winning products, and collaborated with top scientists, visionaries, and medical experts. He's a frequent speaker at conferences like Tech, Open Air, Brand Week, and Canatech. And today I'm really excited about this topic because it's a big name. Everyone's hearing about NMN and NAD and longevity and health span, and we're going to break it down for you today and talk all about NMN and NAD and all the science that we know, because Baran was just saying, the science is pretty new here, but we're going to break down everything that we know so far in our discussion today. And with that, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited about this because I think I first recorded about NAD precursors about 4.5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was one of the first, oh gosh, I'm going to say one of the first 20 recordings I did on my podcast. So I always ask my guests first, like, why such an interest in this?
I think for me, it was probably personal.
Yeah.
As I started aging, I was looking for ways to help slow down aging. And I was super curious about NMN about, I think, 5, 6 years ago or even longer. And it was so expensive. Trying to find a good source was going to cost me about $10,000 a month. So I think that intrigued me, but it also corresponded at the same time, coincided with the same time where I met Dr. Sussman, Professor Sussman. So he's our chief medical officer, but I first watched him in one of the medical conferences I attended. And there was maybe 30, 40 people that I listened to, and he blew me away. He was just fascinating the way he was talking about science and his background, and he was answering questions. And it turned out that, if you don't mind, I'll give you some background on him because it really influences how we do our work and our research. So his background happened to really be very much into what we are doing currently. So he's a professor. He's a Harvard-trained physician. He was a doctor for the longest time. He ran divisions at Columbia University. But then he found his joy in research and moreover drug discovery. He raised over $150 million of NIH grants, wrote over 170 papers. But the drug invention, when it was where he started really enjoying himself. And one of the things that he invented was the fixing the broken BRCA gene that causes ovarian cancer and breast cancer in women. So it was fascinating. He used something called a PARP inhibitor. And while doing that, NAD was everything that he was touching inside the cell. So a lot of the NAD papers do cite him actually, his original work. So yeah, he happened to know a lot about what we are doing. So that's how we got started, and that's where we are now after what 6 years, 7 years.
That's fascinating that he was talking about it that long ago. I think it's really important because this to discuss and break down first, like what happens to our bodies as we age.
Mhm.
Because you mentioned that you definitely have a personal interest in it, as do I. I'm going to
Mhm.
kind of do everything I can just to age better and do my best to avoid disease if I can, right? I don't think we can control everything. However, you have a personal interest in this. We have to talk about what happens to our bodies as we age and then maybe break down how NAD comes into play.
Well, I think looking looking back in the last 100 years, for instance, we have actually doubled our life expectancy. So we're living much longer, but we don't live in a healthy state. Like most people are suffering in their 60s, 70s, especially like 80s. So longevity science has come long ways in the last 5 to 10 years trying to understand, because first we were trying to address the basic diseases, and now what is happening with age. So with age, as we age, all these diseases start coming on, such as cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, heart issues. But you rarely see somebody in their 20s, 30s dealing with Alzheimer's or dementia. So why is that? Why is that, like, as we age, these very serious diseases that are the 90% of the causes of death start coming on? So again, the longevity science has come long ways, and there are now we have about 15 different contributors to understanding what causes aging, and NAD definitely plays a big role in 5 or 6 of these main reasons that we are aging. So NAD, just getting into NAD a little bit, it's something your body produces in billions and billions every day. It takes part in over 300 enzymatic processes, and 70% of it goes into energy production in the cell. But as we start aging, even starting in our 20s and early 30s, NAD levels start declining. So by the time we get to the age of 50, you might as well have only 50% of the same NAD production as you have when you're in your 20s. So it's a big decline. And the way that expresses itself is in a variety of ways. You usually don't have the same amount of energy or same amount of ability to recover as in your 20s. Think about, like, if you do a really hard workout, you are able to just like come back from it right away. You don't have aches and pains. So with the declining NAD, for instance, your body's ability to fight inflammation decreases. And inflammation and chronic inflammation, for instance, is one of the main contributors to diseases or just decline, overall decline. And when you're younger, your body is much better to be able to cope with the inflammation. And as you get older, all these little offenses, even if you live a really healthy life, it takes you longer to be able to bring the inflammation down. So if your body's putting so much energy in fighting inflammation, it doesn't have all that energy to do other things, for instance. So yeah, the idea is, how can we slow down the aging? How can we slow down to get to those levels that your body is much more fragile or much more receptive to various diseases? And then there's a bigger question: can we make you live longer? Can you live past 90, 100, 110, 120, 130? So we are in the longevity science, and we see some radical ideas and innovations that are very exciting. So I do think that in our lifetime, we'll see the ceiling of 120 years being passed. I think people can live to 130, 140. But in my view, that's going to require those radical interventions. What are those? For instance, there's one company that is taking your DNA, creating your own embryo, and then growing that embryo to be able to use that embryo to take stem cells out of it or to grow organs out of it. I know it's a bit controversial, but that's the kind of thing that will allow you to get past those ceilings. So we are looking at it more about increasing your lifespan, which means just the good lives that you live, so you don't have these issues until like much later in life. That's our first and foremost goal. Not necessarily we're out there claiming that we're going to help you live past 120 or 110.
I like that, because I'm not sure, like my own personal, I always like to add my personal belief. I don't know. I'm like, do I really want to sit there all by myself when everybody around me that I know is gone? Like,
Mhm.
me and Baran are the only ones hanging out. Like, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So I kind of, for me, it's definitely about living with vitality
Yeah.
until my time here on earth is done. And that's the way that I personally look at my own longevity. I want to really feel like I'm 30, even though I'm currently 54. I want to feel that way. I want to look as young. And I have to ask you, I have heard and seen some research that people who take NMN look younger. Is that true?
I would believe so. I don't think there's a clinical study out there, but NMN and NAD precursors do have a lot of benefits, and one of them is it helps with skin. Um, so it's, for instance, a lot of our customers report their age spots disappearing.
Really?
So that's reversing, some sort of some kind of a process there. It helps with skin elasticity, but it's after long-term use. You can't just take it and expect it to happen overnight. Some of the fascinating reports we got is, for instance, women in their 40s, they start losing their eyelashes, their eyebrows start thinning up. Or customers report, I think, after long-term use, after 8, 9 months, their eyelashes are coming back. Their
Mm.
hair actually is growing better. So all of those, like if you're healthier, I think you look younger, right? So if it helps you to be healthier, if your skin is healthier, if you're healthier, your skin is healthier anyways, probably. Um, you might look younger.
I love it. I love it because I'm always like, I'm a big believer in beauty inside out. So what
Mhm.
we eat, what we put in our bodies, whether we move, that sort of thing makes a difference. So can we kind of break down the definitions? So there's NMN, then there's NAD. A lot of the longevity scientists talk about sirtuins, and then there's, of course, mitochondria. Like the mitochondria are those energy factories within the cell. So, how do they all connect and make it easy for our audience to understand?
Okay, great question. So we have the cell, right? We have billions of them, maybe 35 trillion of them in our bodies. And inside every cell, there's mitochondria. So mitochondria is a key component of the cell. And one of its most important function is the energy creation. And a lot of actually, if your mitochondria is not healthy, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So mitochondrial dysfunction, almost all diseases start there. Um, so mitochondria, we have the cell. So cells, inside the cells, we also have something called sirtuins. They're just enzymes. They're enzymes that help with growth. They help with DNA repair, that help with splitting the cells. So they are those activators inside. So they work with mitochondria and doing what they need to be doing. And then there are the molecules like NAD and PARP. So for instance, we talk about DNA repair. I'm getting a little out there, but I'll
That's
bring it back
okay.
to NMN and NAD. So why does DNA repair matter? So every day our DNA is exposed to all kinds of chips and offenses, like too much sunlight, air pollution, going through the airports, you're getting through the X-ray. So all those creates little damages to your DNA. So, and quite a few, like a lot of times during the day, your DNA strand actually it splits. As soon as it splits, what happens is PARP goes in there and it just grabs both parts of the strand and puts it together and holds onto it for its dear life. And while it's doing that, it's using NAD. So if it doesn't have NAD, it won't be able to repair your DNA. So NAD is something crucial inside the cell, not only for energy production, as we talked about in mitochondria, but also it helps the sirtuins, the enzymes, to activate. But it's so precious to the cell that the cell doesn't let it out. So NAD doesn't really leak out of the cell because the membrane keeps it inside. So now we are getting into the discovery. So NAD has been known for 100 years. But the discovery of NAD precursors is very new. Only in the last 10 years, we started understanding it. And in 2018, they discovered that there's a receptor outside of the cell that binds to NMN, nicotinamide mononucleotide, and then flips it inside. And once it brings it inside, then inside the cell, NMN converts to NAD.
Ah,
So the discovery is the precursors, not necessarily the NAD, but of course the understanding of what NAD does has come long ways also in the last 5 to 10 years, because now with the precursors, we can test to see what happens when you increase the levels.
That was an amazing explanation. I loved how
Oh,
you
thank you.
explained that. That was really good, Baran, because I find sometimes when people who are not in the space of science, they just want to understand, you know, high level, like how does it work? They don't need to get into all of the minutia of the deep science. So I think that was really good. So
Oh, thank you.
NMN then you explained that it flips once it gets into the cell, it converts to NAD. But can
Correct.
somebody take NA? I think I've heard of, does this, maybe I've heard this right? NAD patches and stuff. Can people do that?
Right. So, I mean, there are even NAD supplements out there, but
Yeah.
they just don't work well. So the only one that seems to work, there's no clinical studies, there's no real research, is NAD IV. So people take NAD through
Yeah.
IV, and they are flooding their bloods with a lot of NAD. So the body, like as I explained, like the membrane doesn't allow NAD to easily get out, but the body is complex, so NAD finds a way to get in there. But there are a lot of questions around it. Some people don't feel great about it. That's because my theory, at least, is you're flooding your system with so much NAD. That's not sure what your body's used to.
Yeah.
Your NAD production is pretty consistent throughout the day. It spikes a little bit in the morning. During the day, it comes down a little bit, but it's constant. But when you're flooding your NAD of like a month, I mean, your blood with months worth of NAD, we're not sure what happens. I mean, people report interesting results on trauma cases or like some big medical conditions. But there needs to be more research understanding what happens. But the NAD patches and NAD supplements, that's why they're not popular anymore, because we have precursors now. So NMN is one precursor, and there's also NR, nicotinamide riboside. That's another precursor. So they work in tandem. They work in a very similar ways. NR converts to NMN, NMN goes inside the cell. But the body is not that simplified. Sometimes some of the NMN turns into NR and turns back to NMN. So there's an ongoing process there. So if you want to increase your NAD levels, definitely look into the precursors like NMN and NR.
Okay. And then is one better than the other, like in terms of research from either NMN or NR?
Good question. So NR has been discovered earlier. So there has been much more studies on NR.
Okay.
So NMN was a later discovery. And a lot of people do believe strongly that NMN is a better precursor. Since we sell NMN, I don't want to be out there just like rooting for a team. So I think they both work. We believe that NMN is the better precursor, but both of them work. There's more good data coming out of NMN, which is great. So they're both good. We prefer NMN.
I think everybody who's going to listen to this is going to want to know, is there a reliable test to know definitively if you've got low NAD levels?
That's a good question. What you need to test is not NAD in your blood. You need to test NAD in your tissue, which turns out to be hard to do and very expensive. So just testing your NAD levels in blood is not necessarily a good indicator. So there's no easy answer to that.
Yeah, I know. I've researched that because it's like, a lot of people out there. So how would I know? I know you mentioned energy levels. And then the science also shows that when you're around 50, you've got half of what you had, about 25.
Sometimes, sometimes. I mean, not everybody's different. One thing we know is it declines. It
Yeah.
declines as you age. Um,
So energy
mhm.
is a big factor. So if you've got low energy, that's one symptom of low NAD. But we also know low energy could also be from other things too. Are there
Yeah.
any other pretty good symptoms to say, yeah, I probably have low NAD?
Very interesting question. don't know if we can really pinpoint the symptoms. It's a very like, we're looking at the root cause. We're like, it affects almost everything in your system, in your body. So the
Yeah.
way I guess I will answer is the benefits when people start taking the product. I mean, most people, especially me, for instance, we started looking into it as a preventive approach. Like, okay, I
Mm.
want to slow down aging. But it's very interesting when people start reporting various benefits. Then you start understanding, like, oh, it really makes the difference in people's lives. Let me give you some examples, right? So, energy obviously is a very obvious one. Cognition, brain fog, people who have brain fog, cognitive issues, it helps them. We talked about skin. Um, it really helps with heart health, for instance. So that's an important one. It's a long list. So an eye doctor we work with actually suggests people when they have um, eye issues, forget, I think it's degenerative maculation,
Yeah, macular
um,
degeneration. I read about
macular
that.
degeneration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to look at my notes. There are so many different things that it affects. That sleep, for instance, like as people are getting older, not everybody sleeps as well as they used to. So a lot of people report sleeping much better, waking up with a pep in their step. So when it crosses so many different areas, it's hard to say, like, this might be the symptom because you have low NAD. You might just say, hey, this might be the reason that this might be because you're aging.
Right. So
Inflammation
really,
is a big one. Let me not forget about it. Inflammation is a very big one. So we didn't expect it, but people will start reporting the next day after taking our product that their knee pains will go away, like a runner's knee pain go away. This was not expected because this is a preventive approach. It's a long-term protocol. So once Andrew and our team started looking into it, they understood the pathways and they came up with some good theories. And sure enough, then we started proving that point in preclinical work that because it actually brings the inflammation down. Um, but
and that must be pretty quickly then, Baran, because if you're saying, because I guess depending on what the issues are and how long somebody has been experiencing issues, like you said, knee pain, that could work on that pathway pretty quickly.
mhm, yeah,
So inflammation must be a pretty quick, you'll see it. See, the reason I say this is because so I don't have any noteworthy symptoms. And
mhm,
I take a lot of supplements. I
mhm,
I take a lot for prevention and proactive health. So I have heard that somebody like myself might not notice anything really obvious. Does this make sense to you? It's more just supporting
yeah,
my stack for
yeah,
longevity.
yeah. So if you're really healthy, you might not feel a difference. We actually, interestingly, based on a clinical trial, human clinical trial, we tested it on an Olympic gold medalist swimmer. So the clinical trial shows that it increases energy levels by increasing oxygen distribution in the tissue, which is a major discovery because that's the reason that you train really hard. So we started working with him, and this guy was the fastest swimmer on earth. He swam 50-meter freestyle, and he won the gold medal twice with 16-year span. And we were excited, but he couldn't really report any difference because he's in top shape. He's in such a great shape. For him to swim, the 50-meter like sort of 23 seconds by like half a split second faster, even if he does, we cannot take any credit for it because there might be so many other elements that goes into him having more energy or performing better that day. But it's easier to recognize that when, for instance, somebody is 70 years old and they have a hard time going up 2 flights of stairs. Now they can go up 3 flights of stairs. So there are some good clinical trials showing that their grip strength, their muscle strength comes back or gets better. They have more stamina. Um, but yeah, somebody who's really healthy, they might not feel anything.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. Now, we briefly touched on ovarian health. There's some research I know that my audience is a little bit more, you know, our ovarian function is petering out as we reach menopause. But many of us who care about our children, or if we are still in perimenopause and want to have children, this is an important finding about NMN and ovarian health. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. Well, when it comes to ovarian health, I was at the Buck Institute of Aging, the leading institute in aging a few years ago, and one of the professors, she showed us the data. That's how little we understand actually when it comes to ovarian health. Only 2% of the entire research spending has gone into ovarian health, um, which is dumbfounding.
Mhm.
Um, Furthermore, ovarian health, it turns out that it has major impact in women's health. It connects to everything apparently, the hormonal systems. So I'm no expert, but just knowing that there's very little understanding, and like, thank God, it's like people are now getting more into it. So we started working with some of the leading experts in the area too. So I will start not necessarily with menopause, but people start taking women start taking NMN for fertility. So there's a trend with that, and that's started with I believe the reports that start coming out from Harvard Medical School by David Sinclair's lab, um, and soon after we started seeing a lot of good preclinical studies showing that NMN does really impressive job with increasing the egg quality, the oocyte quality, increasing fertility rates, helping fix the chromosal alignments. That means, I think, less Down syndrome kind of issues, helping with DNA repair, as we talked about earlier, that prevents genetic mutations that actually your eggs carry over from generations before. So the list goes on. And those great impressive results now prompted, I think, three human clinical trials. So they're on their way, but women don't want to wait necessarily 5 years until the clinical trials conclude. So it does this. It does help with the ovarian health, fertility, but it also helps with the symptoms, for instance, of menopause. It helps with hormone balancing. So the OBGYN doctors start recommending to their patients. So I have to look at the list, but it helps the ovaries to function better. Just like any other organ, NMN helps actually all organs to function better, to optimize organ function.
Yeah, I would say it probably has a NAD has a very critical role in hormone synthesis. It would just kind of make logical sense. I'm sure there's research out there as well, just for hormones in general. So there's the ovarian function and then there's hormones. So like I've done a little bit of reading on it. So it makes sense that it would support many functions in the body overall. So let's move on, because you're going to have people who are going to say, "Okay, I can't afford NMN. I can't afford NAD. What are some natural ways that we can just increase NAD production in the body?"
Well, surprise, exercise.
Of course.
Yeah. Um, Exercise helps definitely with NAD, increasing your NAD levels. But ketosis also helps with increasing NAD levels. It uses a different pathway, not the same as ours. But yeah, if you follow a strict keto diet, you will increase your energy levels. And also intermittent fasting helps with increasing NAD levels.
That makes sense. It's interesting, and I always wonder about this. I was reading how you can actually lower NAD by being in the sun too much. Like, does that make sense? Did I read that right?
Actually, maybe indirectly, it's the opposite. So when you go into the sun, your body really boosts NAD production because NAD is crucial in fighting the effects of the sun and then the UV. Or think about it this way, like especially when I was growing up, we spent a lot of time in the summers in the sun,
Yep.
but we didn't have sunscreen.
Nope.
And sure enough, like if after a few days, once your skin gets used to it, you can be in the sun all day long and not get injured. So one of the main reasons is because your NAD production, your skin's ability, your body's ability to fight the sun is really optimized. It goes back to organ function. But as we age, we can't cope with sun as well. So maybe what you're talking about is like after your body creates so much NAD to fight the sun, it probably depletes afterwards because it's not as optimized as you were younger.
Okay, because I think that's a whole other conversation because I I'm a big fan of getting a little bit of sunshine.
Yeah,
I believe in having like,
yeah,
you and I are probably close to the same age, just like what you
yes,
said. We grew up,
yes.
you know, I grew up in the sun and never had to worry really about sunburns until I got a little bit older. And too much, right? It's all about balance.
Sun does wonders. I mean, I think now doctors do recommend that you need to get out and get sun without sunscreen. But yeah, there's that fine line. You don't want too much of it either. So definitely increasing your NAD production helps with being able to get into the sun. And then you get the vitamin D3. I mean, we do have vitamin D3 in our formula. It's one of the most overlooked longevity, I think, drugs, not drugs, supplements, let's say. I think a Stanford professor tried to put the spotlight on it. But taking vitamin D as a supplement is different than taking the vitamin D from the sun. So it doesn't matter how much of our product you take, get out in the sun.
Yes, I'm with you on that. I always get out. Go walk your dog, everyone. Okay. Um, so I have to ask about contraindications because there are some, there is something I read about cancer and NAD or NMN. Like, I can't remember. Is it too much or is it if you already have active cancer? Like, we got to talk about the contraindications.
Yeah, good question. Let's be very clear about it. Um, Most of the studies show that NMN will help actually with keeping cancer away. There's links in our on our website to those research. However, there's one research paper that came out a few years ago, and they had mice with cancer. The mice already had cancer, and they have given these mice NR, not NMN, and then they looked at what happens, and they saw that some of the mice did better, some of them did not do better, and they saw that the mice was also the cancer cells in the mice were also getting the benefit of the increased NAD levels. And that's expected because cancer cells are very hungry for energy. And NAD is key to energy. But it was a very small study. There were only 10 mice. And the numbers were so even that you couldn't really make much sense out of it. But I mean, it's expected that the cancer cells will benefit from the increased energy levels. But we also see that increase in NAD levels tremendously help the T cells that fight cancer. So if the question is, if you are going through cancer treatment, if you have cancer, should you take NAD precursors? Let's be cautious. There's no reason to recommend that. So that's where I will stop. But if
Hmm.
your cells are healthy, there's not a single sign out there that it will cause cancer out of nowhere.
Okay. That makes sense. And also the thing to note is that, just like what you were saying about the research, not all cancers are the same
No.
either, right? Like, so there's some that go rogue and maybe, so I like that. I like that, it everybody is individual. And so speak with your own practitioner as it relates to that, because there's no
Yeah, I
medical
mean,
advice here. And
completely okay to be cautious when you're in that state.
yeah,
Caution is probably better. That's fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other contraindications for NMN?
We have not seen any red flags. So when you give too much NMN to mice, they just live longer. So last year there was a study that came out. It was giving people 2,000. Doses, by the way, very important with NMN when it
Oh,
comes to
we got
NAD
to talk about
precursors.
that. Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
got to talk about that. Yeah. So they've given patients 2,000 milligrams per day, which is more than double the dose that what we have. And again, there's not a single red flag, not a single effect was reported. It seems to be very safe just because it's something your body produces. It just doesn't produce as much as you get older. Um, One thing we're cautious about is, people in their 20s, early 20s want to take the product. And we say, we don't think we need to. I mean, so far, there's no research that will make us believe that you'll benefit from these increased NAD levels. But, once you pass a certain age, it seems to be very, very safe.
Some of the research says 1 gram a day is what you need to maintain that good level. But I think yours is closer to 2 grams in
No,
terms.
no, no. Ours is a formula. So we have 900 milligrams, close to 1 gram.
Right, right.
But Dr. Salzman, we worked with Dr. Salzman, and we added a few really interesting
Yeah.
ingredients into the formula. So the idea is to make sure that number one, NMN can get into the cell without being damaged on the way to the cell, but like once inside the cell, also to optimize the cell function. So we have certain activators in there. For instance, so let me just give you an example. So we have something called ergothioneine in our formula that is derived from mushrooms like porcini mushrooms and lion's mane mushrooms. And I hope it gets more attention. It could be its own superstar supplements in the future, just because it's found in mother's milk and it's prevalent in mother's milk, and babies have receptors for it. We don't know why yet. Um, it also collects in the body for up to 30 days where it's tissue damage. There's not a single antioxidant that I know of that does that. So the body has various ways to work with it. But the way it was discovered was Alzheimer's and dementia patients. When they give them porcini mushrooms in the morning, those patients will behave really well that day. And there's correlative information out there showing that people who are exposed to more mushrooms, eating more mushrooms, the population has less dementia and Alzheimer's. So that's how it was discovered, but it's really interesting that it's in mother's milk. We also have polyphenols from olive oil, really good olive oil, olive plants, and we have a little bit of resveratrol. So they all kind of work together. So dosing is important when it comes to NAD precursors, because 4 or 5 years ago, it was so expensive. The doses out on the market were really low. And clinical trials show that low doses doesn't do much. Like you really need to be able to give a decent dose to be able to see the benefits. So we based our dose on one of the largest clinical trials, human clinical trials to date. And we dove into the numbers and we looked at the median scores, and we did a lot of deep diving in determining our dosage. But now people are taking more. A lot of our customers, they take double the dose or they take another dose in the afternoon. So I think one way to feel safer about this is because people take these NAD IVs, they take like, many, many, many times more dose than what we are giving. And so far, they seem to be okay with it.
So here's a question. If like for me, I don't really have any noticeable symptoms that I have lulls in energy or anything like that. Can I take like one instead of 2 capsules? Or because you mentioned that it's more optimal for a person to take the correct dose.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Because
I
here,
take two. I take the proper dose. I
so it's
mean,
because it's 2 capsules.
2 capsules makes it to 900 milligrams. Um, yeah, of course. Sometimes people in the early 30s, probably it makes sense for them to just take one capsule, see how they feel. we don't have enough clinical trials like investigating what happens to somebody at the age of 32 versus 62. But overall, it's a very safe ingredient. And for it to work, you need to take a decent dose. And decent dose is what is a decent dose is based on the clinical data that we've looked into.
Of course. Now, can someone feel jittery if they take
No.
two?
No,
No?
it's not like that. It's not like
So it
coffee.
doesn't work that way.
No, and it's not like, again, the energy levels, you will see the increase in energy levels not overnight. That will probably come like after a few weeks. So since it's a gradual thing, people sometimes don't necessarily feel it if they're not in tune with their energy levels. But like a month later, 2 months later, you might want to look back and think about like, was I slower? Like, was I sleeping as well as now? But the energy level increase is more like an overall energy level increase, not like when you drink Red Bull or coffee, you get this little like spike. It's not a spike, so there's no jitteriness whatsoever.
That's good because
It's more like the youth energy is what we call it. When you're younger, you have this like unbridled energy.
I like that. Can we talk a little bit about like resveratrol and ergothioneine? So there's some really interesting. So I recorded a podcast, this is years ago, about medicinal mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And ergothioneine is very high in lion's mane,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of makes sense. Like if you add that into your little formulation, that it would really help with the sharpness in the brain function,
Mm-hmm.
which tends to go down. So talk to me a little bit about, the benefits of resveratrol, ergothioneine, and then you have the olive leaf. Like how is that synergistic?
Um, Let me talk about a little bit more about ergothioneine. So resveratrol is a bit controversial. So there's been a lot of studies on resveratrol, and we found that less is more when it comes to resveratrol. And in our product, it just has the function of working synergistically to activate the enzymes, the sirtuins.
Okay.
Ergothioneine itself is, I think, fascinating. I think hopefully we'll see more studies. It was very difficult for us to figure out the dosage, for instance. Again, dosage is key. We're not putting in there just for window dressing. So what's the right dosage? And we ended up talking to the Nobel Prize nominee in 2021 for his work on antioxidants and vitamins in 1990s, Barry Halliwell from University of Oxford University. And it was funny because he was like, yeah, I'm not sure about like all my other work, but he's like, it brought me to ergothioneine. He was so excited to hear from us. I think he's in his late 70s or early 80s. So more research is needed, but it does help with cognition for sure. But there's whole another list of benefits that it has. It's a very interesting antioxidant.
Mhm.
Again, it collects where there's tissue damage, so it also helps with damages of sunshine and damages of UV light, for instance.
Oh,
Um, Again, it's a long list, but it's also anti-inflammatory. So talking about the synergy, what we have done is we have done some preclinical studies to see how the synergy works. And we looked at inflammation being one of the major contributors of aging. So we injured the cells by using hydrogen peroxide. And then we applied, for the control group, we applied a very powerful steroid called dexamethasone to see how that reduced inflammation in the cell. And sure enough, it was very powerful. It decreased the inflammation by 50%.
wow.
And then we administered each one of our ingredients on their own to see what they do with inflammation. And sure, they helped a little bit, but nothing significant to report. But when we combined them, we brought down the inflammation by 36%, 37%, which is very, very powerful because we are able to compare it to steroids like dexamethasone. And, of course, I mean, not everybody wants to take steroids all day long, every day. So it's a very powerful natural alternative to it. We need to keep doing more studies to be able to report it. I mean, to be able to publish it in peer-reviewed papers. So there's more studies to be done, but the initial results are very, very powerful and fascinating. So that's where the synergistic effect comes in. They work together, and the numbers really shoot up.
That's amazing. So, of course, there's a big thing that a lot of people are talking about manufacturing practices in supplements.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is that you're going to get a few of those poor practices that give supplements a bad name. So I noticed you guys have third-party testing, independent
Of course,
testing.
yes.
Um,
And we made sure that we have a QR code there so people can actually scan the QR code and go to the certified third-party lab's website to verify the numbers.
oh,
And it's not a requirement actually by FDA to have a third party CO certificate of analysis, but we do it for every batch that we produce. But we do much more than that. You know, we scrutinize each ingredient that goes inside. So we have all kinds of tests. Now to your point, yeah, there's a lot of labels don't match what's inside, unfortunately. So it's important to make sure that you buy it from a trusted source.
yeah, I agree. Third-party testing, potency guaranteed, um, superior ingredients, all of those things matter.
Yeah.
So that's great. Is there anything that we missed? We kind of covered a lot in a shorter period of time.
We covered a lot, but I'm sure we missed quite a few too, because again, it's a wide range of benefits, and there's a lot of different clinical studies coming out. But it's okay, you know. I think
Again,
we covered a lot of ground already.
I think one of the big things I always say to people is resonance matters. Like if this resonates with you, I always
Mhm.
encourage people to do research to see if it's something that would work for you. Because, okay, listen, I do research every single day and
Mhm.
not everybody's into that, but I feel like if you're putting something in your body, you have to resonate with this. And for me, I'm always looking at ways to optimize how I'm going to age and be preventative and proactive with my health. This is a
Yeah,
great way to do it.
I think that's the key here. So the goal here is to prevent diseases. The goal here is to stay healthy. So this is one of the most important discoveries in the longevity science, um, because you're able to bring the body up to younger levels of how it fights the various age-related decline.
Yes.
So and more people are doctors and healthcare practitioners are now learning about it. So I want to remind everybody this is pretty new science. So not a lot, not even most doctors understand, and even the ones that they think they understand, I realize that they haven't even seen the latest discoveries and papers. It's because it's so new. The medical community is conservative, and they want a lot of clinical trials before they can believe and recommend something. So there's a tremendous amount of promise with the NAD, NMN, and our science, and I think we're going to see. I'm sure we're going to see many, many more great clinical trial results that's going to come out, and then more people will benefit from it. So, and then we are seeing the application of these in addressing medical conditions as well, which is fascinating. But that was not the goal to start with. The goal was to stay healthy.
I think it's always better if you can just to do what you can to stay healthy. I mean, things happen, but it's interesting that you mentioned Western medicine. I mean, us here in the more alternative health, holistic health, we've been talking about vitamin D at least over a decade before
Right,
Western medicine just started talking about it. So you heard it
right.
here, folks. Um, these are just some of the facts. Your general physician will probably not even know what this is. So if you want to get more information, speak with a practitioner that's really educated in longevity and longevity science. So tell us where we can find you.
Oh, yeah. You can find us on our website, and there's a lot of great articles on our website. The things that I probably have missed, you can read about it. The website is getwonderfeel.com. GET, Get Wonderfeel, WONDRFEEL.com.
That's perfect. And that's a great place to start. And I love when companies really promote the research so that you don't have to go all over the place. So go check out their website. And I just want to thank you, Baran. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. It was a joy being here. It was fascinating to hear that you talked about actually NAD and the precursors 4.5 years ago. So keep up the great work and
Thank you.
keep up helping people. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, Baran. Okay, I hit stop there and I'll hit stop.